It will not be wrong to call it a battle of siblings when we compare the Gionee ELife E6 with the younger sibling, the Gionee ELife E5. Both these phones are the ELife series phones from Gionee India and are very popular in their respective price segments. They are not priced very far from each other. The Gionee ELife E5 retails at around 18,000 rupees, whereas the Gionee ELife E6 retails at around 22,000 rupees here in India. Both phones have many similarities and many differences. In this video, we find out which phone suits your needs best and what are the similarities and differences between these two. Let's get started. Starting with the size, form factor and build quality, these phones come really close, with the Gionee ELife E5 at 4.8 inch, whereas the Gionee ELife E6 is a 5.0 inch device. This 5-inch display is actually a full high definition 1080p display, whereas this is a high definition 720p display. So the display resolution is better on the ELife E6, which is a big plus, but the viewing angles on both these screens are really great. While the Gionee ELife E5 uses an AMOLED display, the Gionee ELife E6 uses a OGS solution with IPS LCD display, which is not bad either. The color reproduction quality on both these screens are tremendous, and the kind of build quality these phones have to offer is tremendous. The Gionee ELife E6 has kind of flat edges, whereas the Gionee ELife E5 is more rounded and comes in more color options. On the rear, you can see the kind of finishing on the Gionee ELife E6 is more premium, whereas this is more stylish and sporty. Talking about the dimensions, the Gionee ELife E6 stands at a thickness of 8.7 millimeters, whereas the ELife E5 is at 6.85 millimeters, which is just under 7 millimeters. So you have the ELife E5, which is slimmer, which has a smaller screen and fits easier in your hand. Giving you a size comparison, if we put the phone one on top of each other, you can see that the Gionee ELife E5 is slightly lesser in length, but the width of these two phones is practically the same, and in thickness the ELife E5 is slimmer by a couple of millimeters. Both Gionee ELife E5 and E6 get 5 megapixel front facing camera next to the earpiece, and they both offer good quality video calling as well as video conferencing features. On the rear, you get an 8 megapixel camera with backside illuminated sensor on the ELife E5, whereas you get a mightier 13 megapixel camera sensor, which is again backside illuminated sensor on the ELife E6. So in terms of camera performance, the ELife E6 is ahead of the ELife E5. The placement of buttons is also different. While the ELife E5 gets the volume rocker as well as power or wake up key both on the left hand side, the ELife E6 gets the volume rocker on the right and power or wake up key on the top, just like you see in many other phones. There is a standard 3.5mm audio jack on the top in both these phones, and on the left hand side you get a micro SIM card tray on the ELife E6, whereas the SIM card slot is provided on the right hand side on the ELife E5. It gets a micro USB port just next to it, whereas the micro USB or charging port is at the bottom on the ELife E6. The E6 is a more sophisticated and more smart looking design, whereas the E5 is more of fun loving as well as the sporty design. So if you are a person who likes sporty elements, colorful, you would probably find E5 to be more attractive compared to sophisticated and simple looking ELife E6, which is more on the elegant side, less on the sporty side. To give you a camera comparison, we click a picture of same object from same angle under same lighting conditions with ELife as well as E6, and as you can see, the picture quality varies between these two phones. This has been set on maximum capacity of 8 megapixels, which it supports, and the ELife E6 set on full capacity, that is 13 megapixel, and the detailing as well as the color quality is coming out to be better on the ELife E6. Camera quality difference is evident between these two phones, and as you can see, the ELife E6 produces better images in our opinion on the basis of results that we see here. Giving you a comparison of the sound quality from the speaker phones of these two devices, I'll play the same track on both of these. The speaker on the ELife E6 is located at the bottom, whereas on the ELife E5 it is on the back panel. So to avoid the sound from getting muffled, I'll keep it upside down. The volume is turned to maximum. Now let's stop this one and play the music on the ELife E6. Again, I'll turn the volume to maximum. Both produce good quality sound. They both produce DTS surround effect, and the quality as well as clarity of sound is very comparable on both when it comes to sound quality. To compare the performance of these two phones, let us run the AnTuTu benchmark on these two phones. They have very similar specifications because they have the similar kind of processor which powers these two phones, which is a 1.5 GHz quad-core unit. However, E6 gets 2 gigs of RAM compared to 1 gigabyte of RAM what you get on Gionee ELife E5. Strangely enough, besides being more powerful on paper, the AnTuTu benchmark score for the Gionee ELife E5 comes out to be slightly higher at 15,764 compared to the 15,275 that we see on Gionee E6. This is probably because of the graphics ratings are higher on Gionee ELife E5 because they use the same kind of GPU, but the graphics resolution is higher with a full high definition display on the Gionee ELife E5 compared to a high definition display that you get on Gionee ELife E5. The same kind of difference we see in the benchmarking on the Nina Mark II when it comes to graphics benchmark. The Gionee ELife E5 gets a score of 55.2 frames per second at a display resolution of 1280 by 720 using the PowerVR SGX 554MP. With the same GPU, the ELife E6 produces 34.3 frames per second, but it has a much higher resolution of 1920 by 1080, again using the same GPU, which is 554MP from PowerVR SGX. When it comes to software version, both are running the Android Jelly Bean 4.2.1 right out of the box, and both support over-the-air updates or OTA updates, in which you do not need to connect them to your computer. It can download the software updates right on the phone itself. About the software interface, the ROM that is used on the Gionee ELife E6 is much more advanced and is called the Amigo OS. It also gets some gesture features which are missing on the Gionee ELife E5. The Amigo ROM simplifies the design of Android interface, whereas we have an application drawer on the ELife E5. The E6 comes with a flat kind of design where you have certain folders which organize your data in a logical way, and you have a certain dock which stays at the bottom all the time. Unlike in the app drawer, the dock goes away on the ELife E5. So this is more close to a stock Android operating system, whereas the E6 gives you enhanced user experience. Just like right on the lock screen, you can swipe to access some quick functionalities like using your phone as a torch by pressing the torch button, and you can take pictures without unlocking the phone by clicking on the camera button, and you can start voice recording by pressing the record button. So these kind of functionalities and customizations have been provided right on the lock screen on the Amigo ROM that is provided on top of the Android Jelly Bean 4.2.1. If you swipe with 2 fingers, you can see the quick toggles, and if you swipe with 1 finger, you can see all the notifications. The same kind of notification 2-finger swipe and 1-finger swipe also works on the Gionee ELife E5, giving the similar kind of user experience on the ELife E5 like the ELife E6. But the Amigo OS adds some hand gesture features. You can wave to pick up the calls or reject the calls. You can change pictures and browse through the screens using the hand gestures. So these kind of functionalities are missing from the ELife E5, which you get on the ELife E6. Another major difference between these two phones is the internal storage that is on the offer. The Gionee ELife E5 gives you 16 GB internal storage, which is non-expandable, and the Gionee ELife E6 comes with 32 GB of internal storage. Again, it is not expandable, so you cannot add a micro SD card to either of these phones. They have fixed internal storage, and there is more storage on the ELife E6 compared to the ELife E5. Summing up our comparison of the Gionee ELife E5 compared to the Gionee ELife E6, We find that these phones are very competitive to each other in terms of display performance, build quality, graphics, hardware and overall performance. There are some extra functionalities that you get on the Gionee ELife E6 and it looks more sophisticated, has a better display quality. However, if you like sleeker and sporty phones, the ELife E5 is just fine. It is just a matter of preference whether you prefer sleek phones or you prefer more sophisticated ones. The price difference is also not much between these two devices, so you can pick either of them. Both offer very strong build quality, good and sturdy feel, nice features, Android Jelly Bean 4.2 right out of the box, and good camera on both of these phones. This is all we have on our detailed comparison video of the Gionee ELife E5 versus the Gionee ELife E6. If you like our video, please press the like button below. For more such videos, please press the subscribe button. This is your host Rohit Khurana signing off. Thanks for watching.